DIY campervan builds a great idea or a potential disaster waiting to happen? Are they worth doing? I'm going to show you some photos today and some videos of some potential disasters in the making, and I'm going to explain the sources a little bit later on in the video. Firstly, let's talk about potential reasons why you might choose to build your own campervan instead of buying one that's been already built. Some people choose to self-build for the satisfaction of making something special for themselves, the sense of achievement, creating a vehicle for themselves to create their own memories and having it exactly how they want it. Additionally, that's another reason. It's just that, to create a home on wheels precisely to your taste. This means you have full control over the layout, the design. You can place storage where you want it, pick and choose what you want in it, and don't include things that you don't. If you want a pink van with blue spots, a yellow kitchen, a green pop top, then you can do that. Although, good luck if you're trying to sell that afterwards. And another reason, perhaps, the one that comes to mind above all others, is cost. People wishing to make savings by just doing it themselves. A built campervan can be very expensive, especially at the moment. Prices have gone up and there are quite a lot of vans which are overpriced with poor spec, yet people are buying it, so the prices still remain as they are. But that's a total other story in itself. By building your dream van yourself, you can save a significant amount of money. Doing it yourself means that you're not paying somebody else to do it. That's pretty obvious, but it means that you're not paying that labour, you're not paying the labour rate. The labour alone can be savings of thousands and thousands of pounds. A full conversion, including pop top, electrics, bed, appliances, etc., will be dependent on what you're having done, but it could be several weeks' work, which comes at a significant labour cost. It's a no-brainer then, just do it yourself and save thousands. Well, it's not exactly that simple, is it? Which I will come on to soon. By doing the conversion yourself, it means that you get to design it yourself. You can choose what materials you use, the components which you want, and the ones which, more importantly, suit your budget. But this also means that you could choose to use second-hand parts. However, there are some parts which I would draw the line at and not use second-hand. I wouldn't consider, for instance, a second-hand bed for the same reason you'd never consider a second-hand baby seat or a crash helmet for a motorbike. Kitchen units can often be found at good value online. Sometimes good value and not used, but often they are used. And that's if you're actually opting to have kitchen units, because you might be choosing to have an alternative layout. You could create a totally removable camper system, a bit like this slide pod which I showed you the other week, or even more minimalistic, just with a bed and then add a few other items separately. There are cheaper options, just like a simple ply frame bed and then using all portable appliances. But if you are going traditional layout, then you will be looking for some kind of kitchen units, and you need to be very, very careful, which I will explain. A traditional layout means that you're going to be buying appliances, and this is where we enter the first major problem. A fridge isn't too bad because although there are manufacturer instructions on how to install them and the airflow which you should have around them, some professional converters choose to ignore that and just install them without the required gaps. But more on that coming up. We're also going to need a sink and a hob. Now this is where the first lot of problems can occur. A problem that is actually caused by the kitchen units themselves. And this is a really quite a complex matter, and I'm not going to go into it in too heavy a detail, but a gas burner has manufacturer's instructions which need to be followed for the correct installation. This is due to a number of factors which the manufacturer of the component has considered. One of the main factors here is the distance between the surrounding surfaces, and the main one, which even some professional campervan converters just completely not comply with, is the distance between the burner and the surface itself above. When you see these NCC approved conversions, they've got no units above the burner, and this is why. They have to be compliant with the regulation, or they cannot be NCC approved. Those converters who aren't approved don't have to comply, and they either comply or they don't comply. It's clearly shown in the installation instructions the distances which are required. Here, the Thetford and the Dometic, the instructions for both show that you need a minimum of 500 millimeters from the burner to the surface. And then there's also a measurement for the back surface from the burner, and then also the sides. That's something to bear in mind when you're thinking about the burner, or more specifically, the units which it's going to sit in. Additionally is the supply of the gas, and there should be no rubber hoses for the supply apart from inside the gas locker to connect it to your gas bottle. A campervan must use gas-safe, non-flexible piping, which is why you should see copper piping for this aspect of the conversion. But why do you need to know this? Well, so you don't make the same mistake. But to be perfectly honest, is that really a job that you're going to be wanting to do yourself? A mistake could cost a whole host of potential problems, which I don't really need to explain. Although one issue which you might not be aware of, and this relates to insurance. Are there any stipulations of how the gas is fitted and maintained? There are some conditions in some insurance policies. Some contain wordings which mean it's got to be fitted by a professional or in a certain way. So make sure that you do check your policy wording if you haven't had it fitted professionally. If you do choose to carry out the DIY installation of gas, which I don't recommend, at least make sure that it's been signed off properly. Obtain a proper gas certificate. And yes, there are fake gas certificates for some vans. This was mentioned to me by a previous guest of my Fire Pit Campervan Conversation series, which he was absolutely devastated with some of the things that happened to his van. I'll put a link to that video in the description. Absolutely shocking what happened from a professional converter with his van. Use a registered professional, perhaps as part of a habitation check, to include the electrics as well, because that is another massive problem area. A lot of DIYers feel more confident doing the electrics than the gas, but this isn't as easy as people think. Getting the correct components for the application, the correct wiring, installing it properly is not as easy as it sounds. I did do it myself with my van, but I did take a lot of advice from Batteries and Solar in Plymouth. They specified, they made sure that I had the correct wires, the correct gauge and everything. You know, they measured the distances between each different component to make sure that the actual gauge of the wire was suitable for the task which it had. And when I actually fitted it, in the end, before I actually flicked the big master switch to make sure that everything turned on, they actually went over it and made sure that I had done everything properly. Because if you don't do it properly, there's many problems which people can run into. Problems that are not always apparent at first sight. Problems that can cause damage through fire. Simple things like not tightening the connections properly, screwing through wires, twisting cables together rather than using the proper fittings, using household wiring, not using a gland for the solar panel. Complete massive bugbear of mine is that one. And those are just to name a few. Again, if you are going to do the install yourself, speak to a specialist first to help you design the system, making sure that you are using the right components, the correct wiring and the correct connections. And then when you have completed the install, pay them just to check everything. An hour's labour could save you some massive issues and some potential dangers in the future. Mine has been in for a couple of years now and it's due to be checked again. So in the next few weeks, I'm going to be taking it in, getting it checked out, and I'll do a video of it and explain why I'm having it checked, what potential issues could possibly have arisen from the time it was fitted and last checked to now. So do look out for that. As a DIY conversion, you could avoid doing a full electrical installation by using a portable power station. Depending on which one you purchase, you could also use it to power lights, induction hob, coffee machine, etc. And then you might not even have the need for a wiring in a leisure battery. Some people just do that, or they create a system from the portable power station so it can actually be a leisure battery. You can run the systems from the power station. Again, a little bit more complex. Now, these aspects which I'm discussing here aren't really in any particular order, because when some DIY converters are doing the work for themselves, it can take weeks, many months even. So they start with the elements that they're going to need to use the van. The order of a works professional converter would go down, can certainly just be chucked out the window. And windows is generally one of the first jobs to do. Well, after stripping out the van and getting rid of all the waste plastics and everything else you don't need, the windows are cut and a big hole in the roof for the pop top. Are you brave enough to cut a big hole in your roof for your pride and joy? You certainly don't want to get that wrong. Plus, it is structural, so you need to be ensuring that you're using the correct strengthening and fitting parts. Personally, it's not really something I'd do myself, but if you did, then that definitely is something that can save you many hours. Is that the best option though? Could another option be chosen? Could you use a roof tent instead? They are becoming very popular. There are alternatives, and with that, you're not going to be making any costly mistakes if you make a bit of an error cutting a hole in your roof. Roof tents are also cheaper, which might be a welcome saving. The next mistake or problem is from the sound deadening, insulation and carpeting. It can be time consuming if you're doing it for the first time, but it's definitely certainly doable for a DIYer. I did mine myself. Insulation material can be an issue here. Look, this one here is rock wool. Rock wool is not good for a camper van. It can hold moisture, which is not only ineffective properties for inside a camper van, it actually holds onto moisture and can end up rotting the metalwork, which you might not be aware of because it's obviously hidden away. A good thermal liner is recommended on top of the sound deadening, and then the insulation material is used on top of that, and it's commonly recycled plastic bottles, not rock wool. Several brands of this are available, but do watch out and make sure that you're getting the right thickness, because certain areas are better with the thinner material. If you don't have a pop top, then you're going to be likely to be insulating your roof, or maybe you've gone for a halo roof like I have, and this is where the thinner product is used. You don't want the thicker stuff because it's just going to end up not actually being able to fix your roof properly, so you go for the thinner stuff there. The carpet is the next stage of the process, and as seen here, things can really go badly wrong. There are absolute some dreadful shockers here. Preparation is important here, as it can be said for a lot of the tasks. Ensure that the surfaces are clean and grease free. Use the right glue. The proper stuff isn't cheap, but the high temperature adhesive is the one that you need to do the job properly. And another useful tip here is don't carpet over everything in one piece. It might save you some time by not having to carpet the real panels individually or fit the clips to make sure that you hold them in place afterwards. But it's extremely helpful to be able to remove those panels to access the wiring should something go wrong later on, or if you've not quite got round to finishing off your wiring. Removable panels in the rear with hidden clips is my preferred option. Carpeting over panels is not helpful when access is needed. Also, do look out for that if you're buying a built van, because it really can be done as a cost saver, and it just hides away any bad workmanship which is potentially done behind it. Back to the carpeting itself, and this is a job for patience. If you're a reasonable, capable DIYer, then it can be done yourself. It can be done to a good finish. Prepare it well, take your time, and ensure that you use enough glue on both the surfaces. I'm very happy with how mine turned out. Even the joint at the rear, that's the one which can be a bit of a problem for some. Some joints which you see here are absolutely horrendous. Although the carpet is just an eyesore if it's done badly, it isn't going to injure anybody or potentially worse, unlike fitting a seatbed for travelling passengers. And I say travelling passengers because some of them are not made for passengers. They are just exactly that, just beds. Still, they should be secured in the van, and that's usually by using the lashing points which you've obviously got in your transporter, rather than bolting it to the chassis, which you're going to do with other sorts of beds. The rock and roll or rib beds, on the other hand, are totally different because these must be fitted correctly. The problem is a lot of them are not, and they are not safe. 3 MOT converters told me recently that it's a common occurrence that they do see these seat beds which have been fitted poorly, yet they still pass the MOT. Just because a bed is MOT compliant, it doesn't mean it's safe. I've mentioned this loads of times before, and I'm not going to go into the detail about it. I've done several videos of it. Do check those out if you're interested. But these are for carrying passengers, so you want them to be safe. The correct strengthening, fitting kits, bolts must be used. It also must be fitted in exactly the right position. It's a really important element to your van and the safety of your passengers in it. It's crucial to get it right, because don't forget that even crash tested beds can fail crash tests. So to fit this yourself, you really do need to be extremely cautious. Doing a DIY van conversion contains some aspects which are best left to the professionals, the true professionals. Because just because you pay somebody to do a job, it doesn't mean that they are qualified to do it or they're even any good at it. The images of shocking, dangerous and generally poor work here, which I've shown throughout this video, these are not actually DIY errors. These are all from campervan conversion companies that people have paid for the works to be carried out. If you are going to a converter, make sure that you do your research, proper research. There are many good salespeople out there who will happily sell you a poor quality van at a really high price. Just because they look nice, it doesn't mean that they're actually any good. There are some fantastic campervan conversion companies conversion companies who aren't NCC approved, but they still work to the high quality safety standards. They make sure that the work which they carry out is checked. They use gas safe registered plumbers to do the plumbing, the gas works. They use qualified electricians to do the electrical works, and it goes through a strict process to make sure that the checks have been carried out before it gets put on the road, making sure that the correct components are used, and as far as beds are concerned, using the correct fitting kits to make sure that the bed is going to be performing well in the event of an incident. There's lots of very, very good conversion companies out there. You just need to make sure that you are getting the right one, do that proper research and look into it, speak to other people. An NCC converter manufacturer or the Volkswagen California might be your own real guaranteed way of ensuring that the vehicle which you're buying is built to the correct standards, that only guaranteed. But there are other companies who could do it. Are you choosing a converter or a DIY camper? A DIY conversion can be a tremendous amount of time. It can take months of hard work. Do you have the time to do it? Do you have the patience to slowly and carefully work to make sure that it's right? Do you have the skills to carry out the work to the high level of safety? There are regulations to consider that could apply. Do you know what these are? If you do, it can be a huge sense of accomplishment, pride whenever you sleep inside it, whenever you go away on your journey in your dream van. That dream van which has been really hard graft, probably blood, certainly was in my case, sweat and possibly tears. You will get frustrated by doing it yourself, but the end result can be such an achievement. DIY, if you have the skills, the time, the patience, and you're willing to pay for that final sign-off, can be absolutely amazing. But if you don't have the skills, either leave it to the qualified professionals or stick to putting in a pre-built pod like the slide pod, maybe a roof tent above the van, a portable power station, maybe a camping stove for doing the cooking on. There are options for all budgets. You can see some shocking campervan conversions here, or some absolutely incredible well-built conversions here. Take care and thanks for watching.